I saved 637 people from a burning helicopter crash in 1973. And today the nursing home staff thinks I'm delusional because my own son told them. I was never in the military. The medication cart rattles down the hallway of Sunset Manor like a prison guard making rounds. I'm sitting by my window, watching traffic on Route 66 in Flagstaff, Arizona, when Nurse Patterson stops at my door with that look, the one they give to patients who've been problematic. Mr. Kowalski, we need to discuss your stories again. Stories. That's what they call them. Stories about Operation Frequent Wind, about the evacuation of Saigon, about the CH-53 helicopter that went down in the South China Sea with 400 Vietnamese refugees and American personnel aboard. Stories about the 18 hours I spent in the water, pulling survivors onto life rafts while sharks circled and rescue helicopters searched. They're not stories. I tell her for the 100th time. They're memories. Frank, your family has explained this to us. You worked at a tool and die shop in Detroit your entire life. You never served in the military. These fantasies are a common symptom of your condition, my condition. Early stage dementia, according to my son Michael, who moved me here 6 months ago after declaring me unfit to live alone. Michael, who was born in 1976 and doesn't remember the nightmares that woke me up screaming his entire childhood. Michael, who found my old uniform in the basement and threw it away because Dad's getting confused about things that never happened. Nurse Patterson, what would it take to prove I'm telling the truth? She sighs, the way people sigh when dealing with difficult children. Frank, even if we wanted to verify your stories, there are no records. Your son checked with the VA, with the Pentagon, with everyone. Frank Kowalski was never in the military. That's because Frank Kowalski wasn't my name in 1973, but explaining that would require revealing classified information that's supposed to stay buried until 2045, assuming the government ever decides the American people are ready to know what really happened during the final days of the Vietnam War. After she leaves, I return to my window, watching cars drive past on their way to better lives. The other residents avoid me now. Crazy Frank, who thinks he was a war hero. Even my roommate requested a transfer after I tried to explain why. I wake up screaming about helicopters and drowning children. A knock on my door interrupts my brooding. It's Marcus, the young orderly who started working here last month. African-American kid, maybe 25, with the kind of respectful demeanor that suggests military background. Mr. Kowalski? I was cleaning out the storage room and found some boxes with your name on them. Your son left them when he moved you in. My heart jumps. What kind of boxes? Papers mostly. Some old videos. Nurse Patterson said to throw them away, but he looks around nervously. Sir, were you really in Vietnam? Why do you ask? Because my grandfather was 101st Airborne, and he used to tell stories that nobody believed either. Said the real. War wasn't in the history books. I study Marcus's face, looking for the skepticism I've grown used to, but finding only curiosity. What's your grandfather's name? Sergeant Major James Wright. He passed 5 years ago. Right, the name hits me like a physical blow. Jimmy Wright from Chicago? Marcus's eyes widen. You knew him? Kid, Jimmy Wright saved my life in Da Nang in 1972. We served together in the 1st Aviation Brigade. I grab Marcus's arm. Where are those boxes? 20 minutes later, we're in Marcus's car, driving to a storage unit on the outskirts of Flagstaff. Marcus paid the rental fees out of his own pocket, rather than let my belongings get thrown away. Inside Unit 47 are 4 cardboard boxes containing the remnants of a life I thought was lost forever. My son said this was all junk, I whisper, opening the first box with trembling hands. Inside are photographs that officially don't exist. Vietnamese refugees crowded onto helicopter decks. American personnel loading civilians onto transport ships. And in the center, a group photo of the crew that flew the final evacuation missions out of Saigon. Mr. Kowalski, is that you? Marcus points to a young man in flight gear standing next to a massive helicopter. Chief Warrant Officer Thomas McKenna. I say quietly, that was my name then. Marcus stares at me. Your name wasn't Frank Kowalski? Frank Kowalski is the identity the government gave me when I came home. Thomas McKenna was classified as KIA during the evacuation to protect the fact that certain missions never officially happened. I hand him a document from the second box, a death certificate for Thomas McKenna, dated April 30th, 1975. Below, it is a birth certificate for Frank Kowalski, dated May 1st, 1975. They gave you a new identity? They gave all of us new identities. Operation Frequent Wind officially evacuated 7,000 people from Saigon. Unofficially, we evacuated over 15,000. The extra 8,000 were classified South Vietnamese intelligence assets, American civilians who weren't supposed to be in country, families of people who'd helped us throughout the war. Marcus pulls out a video cassette labeled Final Flight, April 29, 1975. What's this? That's the footage my co-pilot took during our last mission. The helicopter crash that should have ended 637 lives. We drive to Marcus's apartment, where he still has an old VCR. The tape is grainy, damaged by years of storage, but the audio is clear. My own voice, 30 years younger, calling out coordinates while our overloaded CH-53 struggles to stay airborne. Eagle 6, this is Mercy 1. We have mechanical failure, losing altitude fast. 400 souls on board requesting immediate assistance. On screen, you can see the interior of the helicopter Vietnamese families clutching children. American personnel trying to maintain order. Everyone knowing we're going down, but nobody panicking, because panic means death. There, I point to the screen. That's when the engine failed completely. The video shows the controlled crash into the South China Sea. The helicopter sinking in minutes, people jumping into water that's black with fuel and blood. And then you see me, swimming between debris, pulling survivors onto anything that would. Float. Jesus, Marcus whispers. How long were you in the water? 18 hours. Lost 3 members of my crew, but we saved everyone else. 637 people who were supposed to die in that crash. I pause the video on a frame, showing dozens of people clinging to life rafts in shark-infested water. That was the last official evacuation flight from Saigon. Officially, it never happened. Marcus is staring at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Mr. Kowalski, Mr. McKenna, why haven't you told anyone about this? I tried. For 48 years, I've tried. But the mission is classified. The footage is classified. Even my real name is classified. When I moved Michael and his mother to Detroit in 1976, I thought I could start over as Frank Kowalski. But you can't run from what you've done, good or bad. What about your son? Doesn't he know? I laugh bitterly. Michael knows Frank Kowalski worked in a tool and die shop and never amounted to much. He doesn't know that Thomas McKenna was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for saving 637 lives under impossible conditions. Where's the medal? Same place as my commendations, my service records, and my original identity. Locked in a classified file that won't be opened until everyone involved is dead. Marcus ejects the tape and carefully places it back in its case. Mr. McKenna, what if we could prove your story? What if we could get these documents declassified? Kid, I'm 79 years old with early-stage dementia in a nursing home. Who's going to listen to me? The same people who listen to Netflix. Documentaries about hidden history. Marcus's eyes are bright with possibility. My cousin works for a production company in Los Angeles. She specializes in military stories that the government tried to bury. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus becomes my secret advocate. He digitizes the footage, scans the documents, and researches the legal process for declassifying historical materials. He contacts veterans organizations, military historians, and journalists who specialize in uncovering government secrets. Meanwhile, I'm back in Sunset Manor, pretending to be the delusional old man everyone thinks I am. But now I have hope, and hope is dangerous in a place designed to manage decline rather than celebrate life. "Frank, you seem different lately," Nurse Patterson observes during my weekly evaluation. "More ... focused. Maybe the medication is working. Or maybe you're finally accepting reality instead of living in these fantasies about being a war hero." If she only knew that the reality she wants me to accept is the fantasy, and the fantasies she's trying to medicate away are the most real things that ever happened to me. 3 weeks later, Marcus arrives with news that changes everything. "Mr. McKenna, we did it. The Department of Defense is declassifying Operation Frequent Wind, flight records from April 29, 1975. Your mission, your crash, your rescue operation. It's all going to be public record." I sit down heavily in my wheelchair. "How?" "Your footage." When my cousin showed it to military historians, they recognized the historical significance. Plus, most of the people you evacuated are still alive. When researchers started interviewing them, the stories corroborated everything. You said, "The survivors remember?" "Mr. McKenna, you saved 637 people. Their children and grandchildren have been telling your story for 48 years. They just didn't know your real name." That afternoon, my phone rings. It's a producer from Netflix, calling to discuss a documentary about the untold story of the final Vietnam evacuation. 3 days later, a crew arrives at Sunset Manor to interview the delusional old man, who turned out to be one of the last heroes of America's longest war. "Mr. McKenna," the director asks, "how does it feel to finally tell your story after almost 50 years of silence?" I look around the nursing home rec room, where residents and staff have gathered to watch the interview. Nurse Patterson is crying, whether from shame or joy, I can't tell. The other residents are staring at me like they're seeing me for the first time. "It feels like coming back from the dead," I say. For 48 years, Thomas McKenna was officially dead, and Frank Kowalski was officially nobody. Today, I finally get to be both the man who saved those lives and a man who's been carrying that weight ever since. What do you want people to know about Operation Frequent Wind? I want them to know that 637 people are alive today because sometimes you have to choose between following orders and following your conscience. I want them to know that the last helicopter out of Saigon wasn't carrying American diplomats. It was carrying Vietnamese families who risked everything to help us. And what about the cover-up? The classified status that kept your story hidden for decades? I pause, thinking about all the years of silence, all the nights I woke up screaming, while my family thought I was just having bad dreams about a war one supposedly never fought. Some secrets are kept to protect operations. Others are kept to protect the people who might be embarrassed by the truth. My story was classified not to protect national security, but to protect officials who didn't want the American people to know how many Vietnamese allies we left behind and how many we saved through unauthorized missions. The interview continues for 3 hours. By the time it's over, the nursing home's phone is ringing with calls from reporters, veterans organizations, and families of people I rescued in 1975. 6 months later, the last flight, the untold story of Saigon's final evacuation, premieres on Netflix. The documentary combines my footage with interviews from survivors, military historians, and government officials finally willing to admit that. Sometimes the most important missions are the ones that never officially happened. My son Michael visits me the day after the premiere. He's carrying a box I haven't seen in years, my original military uniform, medals, and commendations that he found in his basement after watching the documentary. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. You couldn't have known. Frank Kowalski was never supposed to be a war hero. That wasn't his job. What was his job? To let Thomas McKenna disappear so the government could pretend certain things never happened. To raise a family and live a quiet life while carrying secrets that weren't mine to tell. Michael unpacks the uniform, holding up the distinguished Flying Cross I earned for the rescue operation. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I signed papers promising I never would. Because some promises are more important than family pride. Because I thought Frank Kowalski's son deserved a normal life more than Thomas. McKenna's son deserved to know his father was a hero. Dad, you saved 637 people. I saved 637 people because that was my job. I lived 48 years as Frank Kowalski because that was also my job. I pinned the medal to my shirt, feeling its weight for the first time in decades. The hard part wasn't the rescue, Michael. The hard part was coming home to a country that wasn't allowed to know what we'd done, and building a life on the foundation of a lie. 3 weeks later, I'm discharged from Sunset Manor. The delusional old man has become a minor celebrity, invited to speak at veterans events and military academies about classified operations and the cost of keeping secrets. Marcus drives me to my new apartment, where I'll live independently with the support of a veterans organization that specializes in helping heroes who've been forgotten by history. Mr. McKenna, Marcus says as we carry my belongings upstairs, my grandfather would have been proud to know his friend finally got to tell his story. Your grandfather knew the story would come out eventually. He used to say that the truth has a way of surfacing, even when powerful people try to bury it. Is that why you kept the evidence all these years? Because you knew someone would eventually listen? I look at the boxes containing 48 years of hidden history footage of heroes who are never recognized, documents proving missions that never officially happened, evidence of a war that ended very differently than the history books record. I kept the evidence because 637 people deserve to have their rescue remembered, even if it took half a century for someone to care enough to listen. The Netflix documentary has been nominated for an Emmy. The families of the people I rescued have started a scholarship fund for military children. The government has quietly changed the classification protocols that kept my story buried for decades. But the most important change is in myself. For 48 years, I've been two people: Thomas McKenna, the war hero who couldn't talk about his service, and Frank Kowalski, the ordinary man who built a life on official lies. Today, for the first time since 1975, I'm just one person again. A man who saved 637 lives and spent 48 years being told it never happened. The truth doesn't always set you free quickly. Sometimes it takes a young orderly, a storage unit full of evidence, and a Netflix documentary to finally bring the light. But when it comes, when the weight of official silence finally lifts, you remember why some secrets are worth keeping and others are worth breaking. 637 people lived because of what we did in the South China Sea in 1975. For 48 years, that was enough. Today, it's finally everything. Asterisk.